Things are crazy on social media after Sarah Jakes Roberts and her husband Tua Roberts were officially installed as senior leaders of the Potter's House. The internet is full of support, anger, and side-eyes. Was this a strong way for Bishop T.D. Jakes to leave a legacy, or was it a controversial handoff that caused disagreements in the church? What happened behind the scenes? I promise you that what we found will shock you. One of the most famous and important churches in America is the Potter's House. Say, Fuhu. Just did something that has everyone in the faith world talking. At first glance, it might look like an easy change. Bishop T.D. Jakes gives his major role to his daughter Sarah Jakes Roberts and her husband Tua Roberts. Behind the cheers and the official ceremony, however, is a firestorm of opinions, divided fans, and highly emotional responses that have taken over the internet. A lot of people thought this was a beautiful moment, passing on a spiritual gift to the next generation. However, for some, it brought up important issues about favoritism, church politics, gender roles in leadership, and even Tua's past problems that they feel haven't been fully handled. We'll look at what really happened at the installation event and who didn't show up in this in-depth look. The responses from people in the church, Christian leaders, and even people who used to be members of Porch House, and the things going on behind the scenes that made Bishop Jakes decide to step down and hand over the reins, especially after recent health reports and changes within the church. You'll also hear about the backlash online, including a thread that went viral and blamed the Church of Hollywood Christianity. Finally, you'll get insiders' views on how this change wasn't as smooth as it seemed on stage. Sarah said something that made half the people in the room stand up and the other half look at her funny. Everyone is talking about what Bishop Jakes didn't say during the service. Keep reading, because there's more to this story than what's in the news. Believe me, what's next might change the way you see the whole Jakes family brand. At first glance, it looked like a victory. A big installation service was held at the Potter's House in Dallas. There was beautiful lighting, church music, and famous people from all over the country. The big event? As of today, Sarah Jakes Roberts and Tua Roberts are officially the new senior leaders of the Potter's House Church. Bishop T.D. Jakes had been in charge of the church alone for more than 27 years. There was electricity in the air. Tens of thousands of people watched the live stream online, and thousands of people crowded into the refuge. A choir filled the room with powerful praise. Important church leaders from all over the country, such as Dr. Anita Phillips, John Gray, and Priscilla Scherer, were either there in person or sent honors online. Oprah Winfrey and even Tyler Perry were caught on camera nodding their heads in agreement as the event happened. But even though it looked good, people who paid close attention saw some things that didn't seem right. First, the event didn't feel like a religious service. It was more like a big award show. There were cameras all over the crowd, taking wide shots, close-ups, and even times that seemed like they were planned, as if they were expecting a certain news story. People online started to think that the church cared more about branding and celebrity culture than real spiritual guidance because of the high-quality production. Then Sarah herself sent a message. She spoke passionately from the pulpit in a tailored white robe about following in her Father's ways. She talked about how she used to feel unworthy to lead because of her public struggles as a teen mom and the stress of being in the spotlight with Jake's family. Some people found it moving that she was so open, but others thought it came across as carefully practiced, especially when she switched from a lecture to something more like a TED Talk. Someone who watched said, "She's charming and well-trained, but it felt more like a performance than a pastoral call." But when Tua Roberts took the stage, that was the most interesting part. Tua has always had a more modern pastor vibe, influenced more by LA church culture than Dallas tradition. Sarah, on the other hand, has a strong personal connection to the Potter's House heritage. Some people in the church clapped while others raised their eyes during his speech, which was full of business-style vision casting, metaphors, and leadership strategies. Tua said that the church needs to change. The tools we used in the past won't work for this group. Strong words, but people on the internet had questions. Was this the Potter's House's growth or a change in name to become a business that does spiritual work? Then the most surprising part came. That being said, Bishop T.D. Jakes never said, "I am retiring." He talked about change, seasonal shifts, and repositioning, but he didn't say anything definitive about the end of his job. This made a lot of people wonder if Bishop Jakes was really leaving his job. Is this more of a symbolic move to keep the family name alive? As long as he stays in charge, others who had been with the church for a long time and were senior staff were not seen on stage or recognized in public, even though they were very important in making the Potter's House what it is today. Some people inside the company say the ceremony was actually a strategic shift with greater meanings, even though it looked like a party. If you think everyone in the community agreed with this, wait until you hear what people started posting the next day. The day after Sarah Jakes Roberts and Touré Roberts were installed as senior pastors of the Potter's House, social media platforms went crazy. Not just with praise, but also with mixed feelings, critical commentary, and subtle shade from regulars and Christian leaders. Official videos from the event went viral on Instagram and what used to be Twitter. The church's main page had polished videos with movie-style filters, positive quotes, and carefully chosen captions. One said, "A divine transition, a legacy kept, a future safe." That's not the whole story, though. People who had been going to the Potter's House every week for years or even decades wrote honest reactions in the comment parts, buried under the happy emojis. "I don't get it. Does Bishop Jakes still lead our church? I didn't mean any harm, but I didn't feel the Holy Spirit like I used to." Even though I love Sarah, this event felt more like a party than a spiritual movement. Where were the other adults and leaders of the founding? Why did they not get recognized? Members of the Potter's House local and satellite sites started to hold small forums and group chats on Facebook to talk about how worried they were about the way the church seemed to be going. Some people asked why authority wasn't being clear. Others said they had been feeling cut off from the church atmosphere for a while. Someone who had volunteered for a long time wrote in a post that it wasn't the same Potter's House they joined in 2004. "I came here to get better, not to be branded." At the same time, Christian YouTubers and online religion commentators picked up on the story. Over 100,000 people watched a live stream called "Is Potter's House Turning into a Celebrity Church?" in just 2 days. The host talked about how sermons have become more focused on the audience and less on biblical depth. They often use self-help language that sounds more like a business leadership class than biblical text. This criticism hit home with a group of Christians who are becoming more and more wary of influencer faith, which is when preaching is mixed with branding, merchandise, and social status. Someone on YouTube said that this new leadership team fits with the cult, but do they still talk to broken people? On the other hand, many people, especially younger churchgoers, were in favor of the change. They liked how Sarah was honest, how Tor was up to date, and how the couple could connect faith with real life. Some people even praised Bishop Jakes for giving his daughter the power to lead in a world where female pastors still face a lot of opposition. People who like Kingdom Legacy shared this picture of what it looks like. We've seen Sarah grow up with all of her flaws, pain, and happiness. She deserves this. Still, the gap could not be hidden. People weren't just upset because of a change in leadership. They were reacting to a change in who they were. People have always said that the Potter's House had a raw, holy, and life-changing vibe, especially when Bishop Jakes preached his powerful, prophetic messages. But now some people were afraid that the church was giving up authenticity for looks. One fan said it straight out, "I came to be saved." Right now I feel like I've walked into a Christian Netflix. Insiders also talked about a quiet wave of exits behind closed doors, members who stopped showing up but didn't make any big posts or complaints, and the reason some of them left. Some people say it wasn't just about the leadership. It was about Tor Roberts' background, which many people think has never been fully talked about, and it caused more trouble. Sarah Jakes Roberts has made a strong image of redemption by overcoming teen pregnancy in public, dealing with her own trauma, and becoming a well-known speaker and best-selling author. Tor Roberts' story, on the other hand, is much more difficult and controversial. Many people were happy when they heard that Tor and Sarah were going to be co-senior pastors of the Potter's House. They saw it as a sign that they were becoming a power couple with a purpose. Soon, though, Tor's past was dug up by internet detectives and longtime critics. They were especially interested in his first marriage, the quiet split, and some leadership choices that have continued to make people scratch their heads. Let's break it down. 1. There were still some questions about the first marriage after the quiet end, and Chill Roberts was married to another woman before he married Sarah. He has several children with that woman. But what people found strange, and still does, was that not much was ever said in public about why the marriage ended. There was no public statement or news of a separation, and the church could not see any kind of accountability process at the time. As someone who was already in charge of a church, that lack of openness didn't sit well with many. Someone who used to go to tours one church in LA wrote, "We were at service one Sunday and his wife was sitting in the front row. Then, after 2 months, he's seen with Sarah in public. There was a lot of confusion, but no one could ask questions." Tor has still not fully talked about the timing. Even though he doesn't have to share every personal detail, some critics say that as a spiritual leader, openness is not only expected, it's required. 2. Progress at One Church LA, drama, and the faith problem of famous people. People used to praise Tor Roberts' church in Los Angeles as a rising star in modern preaching. Many famous people, influential people, and millennial Christians quickly became fans of One Church. But with that success came claims that the church was too focused on its brand instead of its mission. This is the kind of group that modern ministries are trying very hard to keep. The Jakes name will live on for another generation thanks to this handoff. What does that mean for the Potter's House's spiritual DNA, though? When it comes to optics, the worry about image over effect is growing. Several people with knowledge of the church have said that there was a change in internal messages in the months before the installation. Staff were reportedly told to pay attention to the tone of their posts on social media and stay away from controversial topics that could make the shift look bad. One person said that everything had to be just right. Everyone had to put on a smile, wear the right clothes, and be ready for the press. It seemed more like we were putting on a show than celebrating a call to service. This kind of image control is common in big churches today, but it stands out even more here, where fame, money, and reputation are all important parts of the environment. The animal that still looms large. How does Bishop Jakes really fit in now? 3. Is Bishop Jakes moving back or leading from the background? Even though the change has happened, Bishop Jakes is still involved in a number of important projects. He is still in charge of the T.D. Jakes Real Estate and Development Company, which is working on big city projects in Atlanta and Dallas. Despite this, he keeps writing books and giving big speeches. Finally, he is still in charge of spiritual matters and running a few Potter's House network churches, such as Potter's House North and Denver. That is, he's still there. Some people think that this means Sarah and Tor are only co-pastor in name, while Bishop Jakes still controls the church's major decisions, messages, and money flow from behind the scenes. It's possible that what we're seeing is just a ceremony and not a real move. Sarah and Tor are the faces, but Bishop is still the leader. They used to work for the church. That brings up an even more important question if it's true. Is the church really changing, or is it just putting the same order in a better-looking box? So let's be clear. When a religious organization turns into a family business, it's hard to tell the difference between passing on traditions and taking charge. But here's the catch. There are hints from people close to the Jakes family that not everyone agrees with this direction. One anonymous source said that there might be disagreements within the family about how to handle the legacy and whether Tor's impact is weakening the spiritual foundations of what Bishop Jakes built. Even though the names haven't been revealed, we do know this. On the inside, not everyone is happy. Some people are waiting and watching. One thing is clear. Sarah Jakes Roberts and Tor Roberts will be running the Potter's House from now on. Not just in one church, but in the whole culture of modern Christianity, there is a big change going on. The change from one era to the next means that ministry and media are now fully connected, and spiritual depth is seen as less important than things like impact and appearance. This may be a reflection of the digital age we live in, but it also brings up very troubling questions. Maybe the church cares too much about how it looks. Are we putting charm ahead of calling and loyalty ahead of following? And when families with a long history like the Jakes pass the baton? Are we seeing God-ordained succession or smart brand management? Let's be honest. People, public opinion, and building a platform can all put pressure on the church, along with the Potter's House, which is a big mission. It affects millions of people around the world, takes care of huge amounts of money, and shapes the direction of Christian society as a whole. Sarah Jakes Roberts is definitely talented. She's a great speaker, honest about her problems, and many people can relate to her. Her story from being a teen mother to leading a ministry around the world is truly inspiring, but with power comes duty and close attention. In the age of influencer pastors, Tor Roberts has also made a name for himself. He is very good at talking to people today. His speech was well rehearsed, but as his past comes back to light and his leadership is scrutinized, the question of spiritual depth versus public appeal becomes more important than ever. And what happens to the flock? That might be the most important question. This change is very personal for people who live in the Potter's House, especially those who have been there since the beginning. A lot of people saw Bishop T.D. Jakes as more than just a speaker. He was their spiritual father, a counselor, a prophet, and a builder. And now that he's taken a step back, at least in public, some people feel emotionally lost. People love Sarah and Tor, but they don't think the church is changing for the better. People are still arguing about social media. There is still a lot of fuss going on online. Every day new threads appear. Some defend the move while others break down every news story, soundbite and clip. People have said everything from nice things to angry things. We call this development. The church needs to get bigger. It is not a government, but a dynasty. They should be more like Sarah, broken, healed, and real. This wasn't a spiritual moving. This was the launch of a brand. Even more striking is the fact that pastors and smaller churches across the country are now rethinking how they handle leadership, succession, and openness. Some people are even using the Potter's House move as a lesson, warning about the risks of stage preaching too much, the bigger picture, restoration, reorientation, or change of direction. Something is for sure, the church is changing, no matter what you think about it. It will be digital for the next crop of pastors. They will be marked. They'll be linked to platforms, relationships, and the public's attention. But will they also be linked to God's heart, the Bible, and other people? That's the question we all have to think about. Not just for Sarah and Tor, but for every church leader and Christian who is trying to figure out their faith in a world full of influencers. Maybe, just maybe, this time with the Potter's House isn't the end. It could be a divine chance to realign our beliefs, get back to being ourselves and ask, who are we really following? The shepherd or the show? What do you think? Was this a great way for the father to pass the torch to the daughter? A lasting move that fits with God's timetable? Or was it a carefully thought-out move to protect the Jakes name and keep the family in charge? Allow us to talk about it below. Click like if this story made you think. Leave your thought below if you have something to say. Remember to subscribe for more in-depth looks at the most important stories in faith, society, the gospel, and celebrity. Share this video too, because it's more important than ever to have these talks. The church is at an intersection, and it's up to us to decide where to go from here. Don't be confused or worried, just clap.